Welcome, my friend. Before we step into the quiet cloisters of the medieval monastery, take a moment to let your body grow still. Rest your head, soften your breath, and allow the weight of the day to ease away. This is not a hurried journey. It is a slow unfolding, a gentle exploration of a world both distant and strangely familiar. Tonight, we travel back to the Middle Ages, to the secluded world of the monastery. For many, the image of monastic life is one of peace. Stone walls echoing with chants, gardens tended with care, books copied with patient hands. But beneath that calm exterior lay a life of unrelenting discipline, silence, and endurance. To live in a monastery was to surrender comfort, to abandon freedom, and to dedicate yourself to a rhythm that few today could bear. Imagine the setting. The monastery rises on a hill, its stone walls weathered by centuries of wind and rain. Beyond the gates lies silence, broken only by the sound of bells. Inside, the air smells of damp stone, of wax from burning candles, of earth from the garden. The corridors are dim, the light narrow. The sound of footsteps softened against flagstones, worn smooth by generations of monks. This is a world shaped by devotion, but also by hardship. The day begins before dawn, with cold air biting against weary bodies. Meals are sparse, often little more than bread, broth, and water. Work fills the hours. In the fields, in the scriptorium, in the kitchens, and above all is silence, a rule that demands restraint of tongue, the holding back of laughter, and the suppression of self. In the quiet of this place, there is beauty. In the chants, in the manuscripts, in the gardens. But for most of us, to step into this life, even for a day, would be a trial beyond endurance. Over the course of tonight's journey, we will walk through the cloisters of daily life, listen to the voices of monks and abbots, uncover the mysteries of manuscripts and relics, explore the contrasts between poverty and wealth, and reflect on the legacy left behind by these hidden worlds. So, let us begin slowly. Close your eyes if you wish, and imagine the monastery gates opening before you. Step inside, into a world of silence, devotion, and discipline. A world where survival itself meant surrender. Imagine that you are living in a monastery in the Middle Ages. The world beyond the monastery walls, the villages, the markets, the fields. Feels distant now. Here life is enclosed, deliberate, shaped entirely by the sound of the bells that mark the passing of the hours. The day begins long before the sun rises. In the darkness of the night, a bell tolls. Its sound is not urgent, but steady, echoing softly through the stone corridors. You rise from your narrow bed, perhaps nothing more than a straw-filled mattress, the air cold against your skin. The chamber is dim, lit only by a small lamp or the faint light of the moon filtering through narrow windows. You move quietly, for words are few in this place. Together with the other monks, you make your way into the chapel. The air is cool and heavy with the scent of wax. Candles flicker, casting long shadows across the stone walls. Voices rise in chant, calm, steady, and unhurried. It is the sound of prayer in the night, a rhythm as much as a devotion, carrying you into the first hours of the day. After prayers, a simple meal is taken. Bread, dark and coarse, perhaps a little cheese, or a cup of watered ale. The food is not meant to please, but to sustain, reminding you of humility and restraint. Meals are eaten in silence, while a single monk reads aloud from scripture or a book of instruction. Your hands are busy, but your ears are turned toward the words. Your thoughts guided not by conversation, but by teaching. The monastery is not only a place of prayer, but of work. After the morning meal, the brothers go to their tasks. Some tend the fields, their hands steady as they sow grain, prune vines, or gather vegetables from the garden. Others work in the kitchens, preparing the next sparse meal. Some carry tools, repairing walls, mending roofs, cutting wood for the fire. And then there is the scriptorium, a long, quiet room where monks sit at wooden desks. Each desk holds parchment, ink, and carefully cut quills. Here, books are copied by hand, line by line, word by word. The sound of quills scratching across parchment fills the air. Slow, steady, rhythmic. It is work that requires patience. A task that may take months or years for a single book. Imagine yourself in that room. The light filters through high windows. The smell of ink lingers, sharp and earthy. You bend low over the page, careful not to smudge the lines. The letters take shape slowly, your hand moving in repetition, your mind quiet, your body still. Throughout the day, the bell calls you back to the chapel. 7 times the monks gather. Before dawn, at sunrise, at mid-morning, at noon. In the afternoon, at sunset, and before nightfall. Each gathering is marked by chant, psalm, and prayer. The voices rise and fall, steady and measured, echoing in the vaulted space. Time does not belong to you. It belongs to the rhythm of devotion. Every hour is accounted for, every task bound to prayer. At midday, another meal is taken. It is slightly larger, perhaps a bowl of pottage, a thick stew of beans, peas, and grain. Meat is rare, eaten only on special feast days. Most meals are plain, reminding you always of moderation and discipline. Silence continues to rule the dining hall. The only voice is that of the reader, who recites from scripture while the others eat. The scraping of spoons, the crunch of bread, the faint crackle of the fire are the only other sounds. As the sun lowers, work slows. The monks gather once more for prayer, the light of candles glowing warmly in the chapel. The chant is slower now, more subdued, preparing the body and mind for rest. Finally, after the last prayer of the day, you return to your chamber. There is no conversation, no idle laughter, no storytelling by the fire. The room is dark, cold, quiet. You lie down on your straw bed, your body weary from work and your mind worn from discipline. Sleep comes not as leisure, but as necessity. For before long, the bell will toll again, and the rhythm will begin anew. This was the life of a monk in a medieval monastery, a life of silence, repetition, discipline, and devotion. The comforts of family, freedom, and pleasure were left behind. In their place stood order, humility, and the steady passage of days measured only by bells and prayers. For most of us today, accustomed to choice and comfort, such a life would be nearly impossible to endure. Yet for those who lived it, this rhythm became their world. Simple, unchanging, and complete. When we think of medieval monasteries, one name rises again and again. Saint Benedict of Nursia. Though he lived centuries before the height of the Middle Ages, his vision and his rule shaped the rhythm of monastic life across Europe for centuries to come. To understand the monastery is, in many ways, to understand him. Benedict was born in the late 5th century in Italy, at a time when the Western Roman Empire had collapsed and the old order of the world was fading. The lands were troubled with invasions, poverty, and uncertainty shaping daily life. From this setting came a young man who sought not power or wealth, but stillness. As a student in Rome, Benedict grew weary of the city's noise and distractions. Imagine him walking through its crowded streets. Merchants shouting, carts rattling over stones, the voices of politicians, philosophers, and priests, all mingling. For Benedict, this world felt empty, too full of vanity, too far from the quiet he longed for. So he left. He retreated into the hills, seeking silence, solitude, and prayer. He lived for years as a hermit in a cave near Subiaco, with little more than bread and water brought to him by a kind shepherd. It was here that his vision of monastic life began to take form. Benedict's most lasting gift was not simply his example, but his rule, a book of guidance for monks, written with clarity, balance, and calm wisdom. The rule emphasized 3 central vows: poverty, chastity, and obedience. But more than that, it emphasized stability, humility, and moderation. Unlike some earlier forms of monasticism, which demanded extreme fasting or harsh self-punishment, Benedict sought a life that was strict but sustainable, a rhythm of prayer, work, study, and rest. Imagine a group of monks gathered in a stone chamber as Benedict reads aloud his rule. His voice is measured, steady. He speaks of the importance of silence, the necessity of obedience, the value of community over selfishness. Each word carries weight, not as command, but as guidance. Over time, his rule spread, shaping not only monasteries in Italy, but across all of Europe. It became the foundation for Western monasticism, followed for centuries, adapted by countless communities. Benedict himself never sought fame. He lived quietly, founding monasteries, guiding communities, and embodying the balance he preached. He died around the year 547, but by then his vision was already spreading, carried by those who had lived under his guidance. Imagine his final days. A small chapel, monks gathered in prayer, the sound of chants rising as Benedict lay quietly. His life had been one of devotion, and his death was marked with the same calm rhythm. In later centuries, Benedict was remembered not only as a saint, but as the father of Western monasticism. His rule continued to guide monasteries through the medieval period and beyond. Through it, generations of monks shaped their lives, waking at dawn, chanting, working, copying texts, and living in steady discipline. The memory of Benedict is not of grandeur or conquest, but of quiet endurance. A reminder that sometimes the most lasting influence comes not from noise, but from silence. Think of Benedict not as a distant figure, but as a man who sought what many still seek: a life of purpose, order, and calm. His rule may seem severe to us now, but to those who lived it, it provided meaning in an uncertain world. As you rest tonight, consider the rhythm he gave to centuries of lives, a rhythm of prayer, work, and stillness. For Benedict, this was not burden, but peace. Among the most remarkable contributions of medieval monasteries were their manuscripts, books created by hand, copied with precision, and decorated with care. These books preserved not only scripture, but also philosophy, history, medicine, and poetry. Without the patient work of monks, much of the knowledge of the ancient world might have vanished. Yet these manuscripts are not only records, they are works of mystery and beauty in themselves, each one unique, each one shaped by the quiet labor of hands in silence. Imagine the scriptorium, a long, narrow room in the monastery. The air smells of parchment, ink, and lamp oil. Light filters through high windows, falling in golden shafts across wooden desks. Monks sit in silence, bent over their work. Each has a quill cut from a goose feather, a pot of ink carefully prepared, and sheets of parchment stretched smooth. The only sound is the scratch of quills against parchment, steady and rhythmic, like the soft ticking of time itself. Hour after hour, line after line, the words take shape. Mistakes are rare, for correction is difficult. Each letter must be exact, each word carefully placed. The act of copying becomes a form of prayer, patient, steady, and humble. Some manuscripts were plain, but others were illuminated, decorated with vivid colors and touches of gold. The letters were embellished with curling vines, flowers, and fantastical creatures. Margins were filled with tiny scenes of daily life, or with intricate patterns that seemed to stretch endlessly. Imagine opening one of these books by lamplight. The page glows softly, the gold leaf catching the flame's reflection. The colors are deep, blues, reds, and greens, made from rare minerals and plants. The designs are delicate, precise, yet alive, as if the page itself is breathing. These illuminations were not only decoration, they were symbols. Flowers suggesting renewal, gold suggesting the divine, patterns suggesting infinity. Each detail was meant to draw the eye, to focus the mind, to guide the reader into reflection. To hold a medieval manuscript today is to hold a mystery. Who copied it? Whose hand shaped those letters? Who ground the pigments for the colors? Who applied the gold leaf so carefully? Their names are lost, their faces forgotten, but their work endures. Imagine a monk copying a text late into the night. The candle flickers, the ink runs low, his hand aches. Yet he continues, knowing that the book he creates will outlive him, carrying knowledge into the future. In this quiet, anonymous labor, there is something both fragile and eternal. Though many manuscripts were Bibles, psalters, or prayer books, others carried different kinds of knowledge. Aristotle's philosophy, Galen's medicine, the poetry of Virgil. These too were copied and preserved. In monasteries, the ancient world was not forgotten, but remembered, translated, and adapted. Imagine a book of astronomy, its diagrams drawn carefully, showing the stars and planets as monks understood them. Or a herbal, filled with drawings of plants, each one labeled with its healing properties. These books were as practical as they were beautiful, serving as tools for teaching and healing. The manuscripts of monasteries remind us of a paradox. They were created in silence, in obscurity, by men whose names we do not know. And yet, their work carried across centuries, shaping worlds they never imagined. Picture one last image. A single book resting on a wooden desk, its pages filled with words and colors, its surface glowing in lamplight. The monk who copied it is gone. The monastery that housed it may be in ruins, but the book endures. In its endurance, we glimpse the mystery of human patience, the quiet, steady desire to preserve, to remember, to pass on. When we imagine a monastery, we may think only of poverty and humility. Simple meals, plain robes, bare stone walls, and yet medieval monasteries were also centers of wealth and influence. They held lands, commanded labor, and often shaped the politics of their age. To enter their cloisters was to encounter not only silence, but also power. At the head of the monastery stood the abbot, chosen by the monks, but often with the approval of patrons or local lords. The abbot held authority both spiritual and practical. He guided prayer, enforced the rule, and oversaw the daily rhythm of the community. But he also managed lands, directed finances, and dealt with kings and bishops. Imagine the abbot seated in his chamber, a heavy wooden desk before him. On the desk lies parchment filled with accounts, lists of tenants, records of harvests, inventories of livestock. The abbot's voice is calm as he instructs stewards, his authority clear, his decisions shaping not only the monastery, but the lives of hundreds who worked on its lands. His life was one of contrasts, humility in prayer, but power in practice. Monasteries grew wealthy through land. Nobles and kings often granted estates as gifts, seeking the prayers of the monks in return. Over generations, monasteries accumulated fields, vineyards, mills, and villages. Imagine a wide countryside surrounding a monastery. Fields of grain stretching under the sun, orchards heavy with fruit, flocks of sheep grazing quietly. All this land belonged not to a noble family, but to the monastery. Peasants worked the soil, paying rents or giving labor in exchange for protection and stability. The wealth of the monastery fed not only the monks, but also pilgrims, travelers, and the poor. Its abundance sustained its silence. Beyond land, monasteries received gifts from patrons. A noblewoman might donate a jeweled chalice. A king might give a richly embroidered vestment. A wealthy merchant might pay for the building of a chapel. Each gift was both devotion and investment, ensuring remembrance in the prayers of the community. Imagine a golden chalice gleaming in candlelight during Mass. Its surface is engraved with patterns, its weight heavy in the priest's hands. Though the monks lived with few comforts, the objects of worship were often lavish. A paradox of poverty and splendor intertwined. With wealth came influence. Monasteries were not isolated. They were woven into the fabric of society, advising kings, mediating disputes, shaping laws. An abbot might be summoned to a royal court, his words carrying as much weight as those of nobles. Monks might write letters that traveled across Europe, connecting distant lands with steady streams of thought and prayer. Imagine the abbot standing before a king. He bows, speaks calmly, offering counsel rooted in faith. The king listens, knowing that the monastery's prayers, its land, and its influence cannot be ignored. Yet wealth carried its own burden. Some monasteries became complacent, their vows of poverty softened by abundance. Critics accused monks of hypocrisy, living in comfort while preaching humility. Reforms arose again and again, seeking to return monasteries to simplicity and devotion. Imagine a reformer arriving at a wealthy monastery. He sees fine tapestries on the walls, feasts in the dining hall, servants attending to every need. His voice is stern as he calls for change, for a return to fasting, silence, and true discipline. The balance between poverty and wealth was never simple, and monasteries often struggled to hold both in harmony. Picture the monastery once more. In the chapel, monks chant softly, their voices rising in devotion. In the treasury, gold and silver gleam in the flicker of candlelight. In the fields, peasants labor, their hands shaping the wealth that sustains the cloister. This was the paradox of monastic life. A vow of poverty within walls of wealth, a life of humility entwined with power. To survive in such a place meant not only prayer and labor, but constant negotiation with the weight of influence. Behind the high walls of the monastery, there was often a garden. Not grand, not ornamental, but purposeful. It was a space where the monks grew the food that sustained them, the herbs that healed them, and the plants that reflected the cycles of the natural world. In the quiet of this garden, the monastery connected itself to the earth, grounding prayer in the rhythm of soil and season. The most essential part of the garden was the hortus, or kitchen garden. Here, monks grew vegetables that formed the base of their plain meals. Imagine walking through rows of leeks, onions, and cabbages. Beans climb wooden poles, peas grow in neat rows, and garlic pushes its green shoots through the soil. There are beds of lettuce, spinach, and herbs for flavor. Sage, parsley, and thyme. The earth smells rich and damp. The air carries the faint sweetness of growing plants, and the steady hum of bees drifts around you. Monks worked here with simple tools, their robes brushing against leaves as they bent low to weed, water, or harvest. The food was modest, but it was their sustenance. Bread, broth, and vegetables, grown with patience and care. Beside the kitchen plots lay another, more mysterious space, the physic garden, where medicinal herbs were cultivated. Imagine rows of lavender, its fragrance calming even as it sways in the breeze. Nearby grows mint, sharp and refreshing, used for easing stomach ailments. Comfrey, with its broad leaves, is planted for healing wounds and broken bones. Valerian grows in shaded corners, its roots thought to bring sleep. Monks studied and preserved ancient texts on medicine, blending knowledge from Galen, Dioscorides, and local tradition. With this knowledge, they prepared remedies for themselves, for travelers, and sometimes for villagers who sought help at the monastery gates. Picture a monk in a small chamber, crushing herbs with a mortar and pestle. The sound is steady, rhythmic, as he mixes powders and infusions, preparing small vials of tincture. The scent of rosemary and thyme lingers in the air, blending with the sharp tang of vinegar. Beyond herbs and vegetables, monasteries often planted orchards and vineyards. Apples, pears, and plums hung heavy on their branches in autumn. Grapevines stretched across wooden trellises, their fruit gathered for wine that was used in mass and sometimes in daily meals. Imagine the orchard at dawn. Mist curls low over the grass, dew sparkles on the leaves, and the branches are alive with birdsong. Monks walk quietly among the trees, gathering fallen fruit, their baskets filling slowly. The air is cool, the rhythm unhurried, the work both practical and peaceful. For the monks, the garden was not only practical, it was also spiritual. The tending of soil, the care of plants, the patience of waiting for growth, all mirrored the care of the soul, the growth of virtue, the patience of prayer. Imagine a monk resting for a moment in the garden. He sets down his hoe, leans on the wooden handle, and gazes at the rows of green. Around him, the garden is quiet, the air filled with life, the silence broken only by birds and bees. For him, this is not only labor, but contemplation, a reminder that to tend the earth is also to tend the spirit. Picture the monastery at sunset. The garden lies calm, its rows neat, its herbs fragrant, its orchard heavy with fruit. The monks withdraw into the chapel for evening prayer, leaving behind a space that will sleep through the night, awaiting the morning sun. The monastic garden was not grand, not lavish, but steady. It fed the body, healed the sick, and offered quiet reflection. It was the monastery's hidden strength, its lifeline, its sanctuary of soil and silence. If there was one constant in the life of a medieval monastery, it was prayer. The day was not measured by sunrise or sunset, by market bells or seasonal labor. It was measured by the divine office, the cycle of prayers that ordered every hour, 7 times a day, and once in the deep of night, the monks gathered. Time itself was shaped by bells and by chant. Imagine the bell tower against the morning sky. Its outline is simple, its walls of stone weathered by years of wind and rain. At set hours, the bell is struck, its sound low and steady, carrying across the fields. Each toll is a summons, a reminder that no matter what task you are performing, prayer is the higher call. You hear the bell as you work in the garden, its sound cutting through the hum of bees. You hear it as you copy texts in the scriptorium, its echo rising above the scratch of quills. The bell does not ask, it commands gently, guiding your steps to the chapel once more. The cycle begins in the deep of night with matins, sometimes called vigils. Long before dawn, the monks rise from their narrow beds, the air cold, their bodies weary. They gather in the chapel, voices joining in psalms and readings, lifting words into the silence of darkness. For them, this is not interruption, but offering. To rise in the night is to remember that devotion transcends the body's comfort. At Lord's, as dawn breaks, The chants rise with the first light. Imagine the sun casting faint beams through narrow windows. The notes of voices rising like light itself, calm and steady. The new day begins with prayer, not with haste. Prime, tersked, and none follow through the morning and afternoon. Brief prayers that draw the monks from their work. Steady pauses that punctuate labor with devotion. Then comes Vespers, at sunset, when voices rise in thanksgiving and the day bends gently toward rest. Finally, Compline, the last prayer of the day, closes the rhythm. The chapel glows with candlelight. The chants are slower, more subdued. The monks bow their heads, their day now complete, and then silence until the bell calls them again in the night. The chant itself is perhaps the most enduring memory of monastic prayer. It was not sung for beauty alone, but as devotion. Known as Gregorian chant, it was simple, unadorned and steady, carrying words clearly, without distraction. Imagine sitting in the chapel, the stone walls amplifying the sound. The voices are low, blending together, each one joining without striving for dominance. There is no harmony, no instruments, only the rise and fall of a single melodic line, like the ebb and flow of waves on a shore. It is not meant to stir excitement, but to calm, to steady, to lift the mind gently toward the divine. The rhythm of chant is slow, unhurried. Each note lingers, each phrase unfolds patiently. It is music that quiets the heart, that soothes the restless mind. To us, the constant interruption of prayer might feel burdensome. To stop work again and again, to rise at night, to chant for hours. But for the monks, this rhythm was life itself. Prayer was not an intrusion, but the core, the reason for every breath. Imagine yourself copying a manuscript in the scriptorium. The bell rings. You set down your quill, rise, and join the others. For a time, you chant, bow, and recite. Then you return to your desk, the work resuming, but now suffused with calm from the prayer just spoken. In this way, labor and prayer were not separate, but woven together. Picture the monastery at twilight. The chapel glows softly with candles. The monks chant their last prayers of the day, their voices echoing gently against the stone. Outside, the world grows quiet. Fields lie in shadow. The river reflects the fading light. The day has been divided into hours, but it is not fragmented. It is whole, complete, bound together by the steady rhythm of bells and the sound of chant. This was the monastery's heartbeat, calm, repetitive, enduring. If the chapel was the heart of the monastery, then the cloister was its soul. It was a square, open courtyard, often surrounded by covered walkways lined with arches. Here, monks walked in silence, their footsteps echoing softly on stone, their thoughts turned inward. The cloister was not a place of labor or even of prayer in words. It was a space for reflection, for solitude, for the quiet tending of the spirit. Imagine stepping into the cloister. The grass in the center is cut short, sometimes planted with herbs or small trees. The air is still, the sound of the outside world muted by the thick walls of the monastery. Arched walkways frame the courtyard, their shadows cool and protective. The only sound is the soft shuffle of sandals on stone, the occasional cooing of doves nesting in the rafters. The cloister is a place of stillness, but also of rhythm. Monks walk its paths slowly, often in circles, their hands folded, their heads slightly bowed. They do not speak. Their silence is intentional, a discipline, an offering of restraint. Silence was one of the defining marks of monastic life. Words were used sparingly, often only for prayer, instruction, or necessity. Laughter was restrained, idle chatter forbidden. For many, this silence was difficult, even suffocating. But for the monks, it was a path toward humility, a way of listening not only to others, but to God. Imagine going an entire day without speaking. You rise, you work, you eat, you pray, and yet your tongue is still. The silence presses around you, at first heavy, then gradually calming, like a cloak drawn close. In that silence, your senses sharpen. You notice the sound of the wind, the texture of stone, the rhythm of your own breath. The silence of the cloister was not emptiness, it was fullness, a space in which the noise of the world fell away, and the inner life could grow. Within the cloister, solitude was not loneliness. The monks lived together, ate together, prayed together, and yet, in silence, each man lived also within himself, carrying his own thoughts, struggles, and devotions. Imagine sitting on a wooden bench in the cloister as the afternoon sun filters through the arches. The warmth touches your skin, the shadows stretch long across the courtyard. Your mind begins to wander, not with noise, but with quiet thoughts. Memories of your past life, reflections on scripture, whispers of questions too deep for words. The cloister gives space for this wandering, for this slow unfolding of the self. The cloister was not only practical, it was symbolic. Its four sides represented the completeness of the world: north, south, east, and west. Its square shape suggested stability, order, and eternity. To walk its paths was to walk within the world, yet enclosed by the monastery's embrace. In its design, the cloister mirrored the monastic life itself, enclosed, steady, repetitive, and focused, not on the noise of the outside, but on the stillness within. Yet the silence and solitude were not always easy. For new monks, the absence of speech could feel like a weight. Loneliness could creep in, memories of family or the outside world tugging at the mind. Temptations of thought, pride, doubt, desire often grew louder in silence. Imagine lying awake in your narrow bed, the monastery silent around you. You hear the faint creak of wood, the distant call of an owl. In the stillness, your thoughts grow louder, your mind restless. For the monks, this was part of the struggle, to master not only the tongue, but the wandering mind. Picture the cloister at twilight. The sky above glows with the last light of day. The arches cast long shadows. The grass in the courtyard darkens. A single monk walks slowly along the path. His steps measured, his hands folded. The air is cool, the silence deep. This is not emptiness, but presence. The still presence of reflection, of solitude, of a life turned inward. For most of us, such silence would be difficult, even unbearable. But for the monks, it was their sanctuary, their discipline, their way of shaping the soul. Though monasteries are often remembered for their peace, life within them was far from easy. To live as a monk in the Middle Ages was to embrace hardship, physical, mental, and spiritual. It was a life of discipline, but also of constant testing. And while some found deep peace in this rhythm, many struggled in silence. Meals in the monastery were plain, sparse, and often repetitive. Bread, beans, and thin broth formed the bulk of the diet. Meat was rare, permitted only on feast days or in times of sickness. The rule called for moderation, reminding monks to eat only enough to sustain, never enough to indulge. Imagine sitting in the refectory at midday. The hall is dim, the air heavy with the scent of broth and baked bread. You eat in silence while scripture is read aloud, your bowl nearly empty before your stomach feels full. The hunger is not unbearable, but it lingers. A quiet ache, a constant reminder of discipline. For us, accustomed to choice and abundance, such scarcity would feel severe. But for the monks, hunger was embraced as part of humility. a way of drawing closer to the divine. Stone walls kept out invaders, but not the chill. In winter, monasteries were bitterly cold. Fires were rare, often lit only in the kitchens or in the abbot's chamber. The cloisters and dormitories were unheated, their air damp and sharp. Imagine lying on a straw bed at night, the wind pressing against the shutters. Your blanket is thin, your body shivers, your breath visible in the air. You wake before dawn, your limbs stiff, your hands numb as you move towards the chapel. The cold is constant, a silent companion in every season. Without modern medicine, illness spread easily in the cloister. The close quarters of shared living meant that coughs, fevers, and infections could pass quickly from one monk to another. Though monasteries had herb gardens and knowledge of remedies, cures were limited. Imagine a monk lying in his narrow bed, his breathing shallow, his body weak. Another sits beside him, reading softly from scripture, offering presence if not healing. In the stillness of illness, the monastery's silence feels heavier, a reminder of both fragility and faith. Not all struggles were of the body. The greatest battles often took place within the mind and the soul. Monks faced temptation, of desire, of pride, of restlessness. Some grew weary of silence, longing for conversation, for laughter, for the world they had left behind. Others struggled with doubt, questioning their faith, their vows, their purpose. Imagine a monk walking alone in the cloister at night, his mind unsettled. The stars above seem distant, the prayers of the day feel hollow. His thoughts wander to family, to the freedom of the outside world, to the life he surrendered. In that moment, temptation is not dramatic, but quiet, a whisper that pulls against his vow. The monastery offered structure, but not always peace. Each monk carried his own battles, fought in silence, hidden from the eyes of others. The vow of obedience was absolute. Every monk was subject to the authority of the abbot and to the rule itself. There was little room for independence, for personal choice, for self-expression. Imagine being corrected by the abbot for a mistake in prayer or in work. His tone is calm but firm, reminding you of humility. You bow your head, accepting the rebuke, swallowing your pride. For some, this surrender was freeing. For others, it was a heavy weight. The loss of self in service to obedience. Picture the monastery at night. The halls are dark, the air cold, the silence deep. In their cells, monks lie awake, some at peace, others restless. The hardships of hunger, cold, illness, temptation, and obedience press against them. Yet, with the toll of the bell, they rise once more, stepping back into the rhythm of prayer and labor. For most of us today, these hardships would feel unbearable. But for the monks, they were embraced as discipline, not punishment, but path. A way to strip away the self, to find humility, and, in time, to seek peace. While monasteries were places of prayer and contemplation, they were also centers of work. The rule of Saint Benedict declared, "Idleness is the enemy of the soul." And so, monks labored not only for sustenance, but as a form of devotion. Their hands shaped fields, tended animals, brewed ale, and built the very walls around them. In work, as in prayer, there was discipline, humility, and rhythm. Imagine the monastery's fields stretching into the distance. Wheat and barley sway in the wind, vineyards climb across wooden frames, orchards cast long rows of shade. In the early morning, monks walk into the fields with simple tools: hoes, sickles, spades. Their robes brush against the stalks, their sandals press into the damp earth. They sow seed with measured gestures, harvest grain with slow sweeps of the sickle, and thresh with calm repetition. The rhythm of labor is quiet, steady, and purposeful. Every sheaf of wheat, every cluster of grapes, is gathered not only for survival, but as an offering, a way of honoring the Creator through toil. Among the most famous labors of monasteries was brewing ale. Water was often unsafe to drink, carrying sickness, but brewing transformed it into something nourishing and safe. Ale became a staple for monks themselves, for pilgrims, and sometimes for trade. Imagine the brewery within the monastery. Large wooden barrels stand in rows, their surfaces dark with age. The air is warm and heavy with the scent of malt and yeast. Monks stir cauldrons, the sound of bubbling filling the room. The liquid darkens slowly, its aroma rich and comforting. When finished, the ale is stored in casks, carried carefully into cool cellars. It is plain, not strong, meant to sustain rather than intoxicate. To drink it is to take nourishment from the labor of hands, from the rhythm of brewing, from the patience of process. Beyond fields and brewery, monasteries kept animals. Sheep for wool, cows for milk, bees for honey. Their care was also part of devotion, a daily rhythm of feeding, tending, and watching. Imagine a monk moving quietly among the sheep at dawn. The air is crisp, the grass wet with dew. He carries a wooden staff, his steps calm, his presence steady. The sheep move around him, their soft bleating rising into the morning stillness. In the apiary, bees hum as they move among hives. The monk watches them, his hands gentle as he collects honeycomb, careful not to disturb their order. Each small task is steady, deliberate, woven into the silence of the day. Monasteries were often built by the very men who lived within them. Stone by stone, wall by wall, the monks constructed their chapels, cloisters, and towers. Labor was not only sustenance, but creation, shaping spaces that would endure for centuries. Imagine a group of monks lifting a heavy stone together. Their breath comes slow and even, their robes brushed with dust. They set the stone carefully into place, their movements practiced, their strength joined in unity. The wall rises slowly, patiently, as if time itself is built into its stones. For the monks, labor was not separate from devotion. It was devotion. The tending of fields, the brewing of ale, the care of animals, all were seen as offerings, as acts of humility and service. Imagine a monk at the end of the day, his hands rough, his body weary. He bows in prayer, the scent of earth still clinging to him, the marks of work still on his skin. For him, labor is not burden, but blessing, a way of drawing closer to God through the ordinary tasks of survival. Picture the monastery as night falls. The fields lie still, the brewery quiet, the animals settled. The monks withdraw into the chapel for Compline, their chants rising softly in the candlelight. The day's labor is done, yet its rhythm lingers. In the bread on the table, the ale in the cup, the walls that shelter them. Work and prayer, hand and voice, body and spirit, all bound together in the life of the monastery. For us, such constant labor might seem wearying, but for the monks, it was their way of being, their steady offering, their peace. Though cloisters were built for silence and devotion, monasteries were never fully separated from the world beyond their walls. They were landowners, advisors, mediators, and sometimes even power brokers. Their prayers stretched toward heaven, but their roots were firmly planted in the soil of medieval politics. Monasteries were not only spiritual centers, they were also economic engines, owning fields, vineyards, mills, and villages. With wealth came influence. Kings, nobles, and bishops looked to monasteries not only for prayer, but for support, for resources, for stability. Imagine a noble lord approaching the monastery gates. His cloak is heavy with embroidery, his horse restless beneath him. He seeks counsel, or perhaps wishes to gift land in return for eternal remembrance in prayer. The abbot greets him, bowing with humility, yet aware of the power the monastery holds. Within those walls lies wealth, knowledge, and the sacred weight of devotion, a force no lord could easily ignore. Abbots often held influence equal to that of lords. They managed vast estates, oversaw tenants, and collected rents. Some abbots were summoned to royal courts, their voices carrying authority in matters of law, politics, and faith. Imagine an abbot standing before a king. His robe is plain, his tone calm, but his presence commands attention. He speaks of justice, of charity, of the will of God. The king listens, weighing his words carefully, for to dismiss the abbot is to risk alienating the monastery's wealth and prayers. In times of conflict, monasteries often served as mediators. Their walls were seen as sanctuaries, their abbots as neutral voices. Disputes between lords, quarrels over land, even feuds between kingdoms could find resolution within monastic walls. Imagine a dimly lit hall where two rival lords sit across from one another, their hands resting uneasily on the hilts of their swords. Between them, the abbot speaks softly, his words measured, urging peace. The monks chant in the chapel nearby, their voices a steady backdrop to the tense meeting. The monastery, for a moment, becomes a bridge, not only between heaven and earth, but between men. Yet influence brought danger. Kings sought to place their own allies as abbots. Nobles tried to sway monasteries with gifts and promises. The purity of devotion was often tested by the weight of political expectation. Imagine a monastery divided, some monks loyal to their abbot, others whispering of corruption. The silence of the cloister feels heavier now, strained by the pull of power. Even within stone walls, the world could intrude, unsettling the rhythm of prayer. Monasteries were not isolated villages of devotion, but part of a vast network stretching across Christendom. Messages and manuscripts traveled between them. Pilgrims carried news and stories from one shrine to another. Trade and politics connected even the most secluded monastery to events far beyond its walls. Picture a scribe copying a letter that will travel across mountains and seas, from one abbey to another. His words will carry guidance, news, perhaps even admonishment. In this way, the monastery, though enclosed, was never truly apart. Picture the monastery at dusk. The chapel glows with candlelight, the fields lie quiet. The abbot sits in his chamber reading reports of land and tenants. Outside the walls, lords ride across their domains. Kings prepare for war. Peasants labor in the fields. And yet, all are tied, however faintly, to the monastery's rhythm. The monastery may have sought to withdraw from the world, but, in truth, it was always part of it, a quiet but steady thread woven into the fabric of medieval life. Centuries have passed since the medieval monasteries thrived, yet their presence has not vanished. Their stone walls may stand as ruins, their libraries may be scattered, their chants may have quieted, but their legacy endures. To reflect on their world is to see how silence, discipline, and devotion continue to shape us, even now. One of the most profound gifts of monasteries was the preservation of knowledge. Without their patient scribes, countless works of antiquity might have been lost. The writings of Aristotle, the poetry of Virgil, the medical treatises of Galen. Through their careful copying, these texts survived the Middle Ages and traveled forward into the Renaissance, where they sparked new waves of thought. Imagine a modern student opening a textbook today, unaware that the words within it trace back through centuries, carried by monks in silent scriptoria. The scratch of quills in dim chambers became the foundation of modern learning. The patience of monks echoes in every page we read. Many monasteries still stand, their cloisters remain, their chapels still hold light, their towers still rise against the sky. Some are ruins, where grass grows through broken arches and birds nest in empty rafters. Others are preserved, their chant still sung, their silence still guarded. Imagine walking through a ruined cloister. The arches stand open to the wind, the courtyard is filled with wildflowers, the stones are warm under the sun. Even in ruin, the monastery holds peace, its rhythm lingering in the silence of its stones. The discipline of monasteries shaped not only monks, but the wider world. Their agriculture influenced farming, their brewing traditions inspired local craft. Their hospitals cared for the sick, their schools taught generations of children. The monastery was not only a retreat, but also a center of knowledge, healing, and learning. Even today, echoes of monastic rhythm remain. Our division of the day into hours, our preservation of libraries, our rituals of study and work, all trace faintly back to the steady bells of monasteries. Though few today would choose the life of a medieval monk, the lessons of their discipline remain. Silence in a world filled with noise, patience in a world rushing forward, community in a world that often prizes the self above all. Imagine taking a moment of your own day and living it with monastic calm. No phones, no chatter, no haste. Only stillness, breath, and reflection. The monastery's gift was not only what it built, but what it taught. That peace can be found not in abundance, but in simplicity. Picture the monastery one final time. The chapel glows softly in the night. The cloister lies in shadow. The garden rests under the stars. The monks sleep in their narrow beds, their bodies weary, their minds at peace, ready to rise once more at the sound of the bell. Though their world is gone, its rhythm remains, a rhythm of silence, labor, prayer, and endurance. It whispers to us across the centuries, inviting us to pause, to breathe, to find stillness in the midst of life's noise. The legacy of the monastery is not only in its stones or its books, but in its quiet reminder that there is strength in simplicity and peace in silence. Centuries have passed since the medieval monasteries thrived, yet their presence has not vanished. Their stone walls may stand as ruins, their libraries may be scattered, their chants may have quieted, but their legacy endures. To reflect on their world is to see how silence, discipline, and devotion continue to shape us, even now. One of the most profound gifts of monasteries was the preservation of knowledge. Without their patient scribes, countless works of antiquity might have been lost. The writings of Aristotle, the poetry of Virgil, the medical treatises of Galen. Through their careful copying, these texts survived the Middle Ages and traveled forward into the Renaissance, where they sparked new waves of thought. Imagine a modern student opening a textbook today, unaware that the words within it trace back through centuries, carried by monks in silent scriptoria. The scratch of quills in dim chambers became the foundation of modern learning. The patience of monks echoes in every page we read. Many monasteries still stand, their cloisters remain, their chapels still hold light, their towers still rise against the sky. Some are ruins, where grass grows through broken arches and birds nest in empty rafters. Others are preserved, their chants still sung, their silence still guarded. Imagine walking through a ruined cloister. The arches stand open to the wind, the courtyard is filled with wildflowers, the stones are warm under the sun. Even in ruin, the monastery holds peace, its rhythm lingering in the silence of its stones. The discipline of monasteries shaped not only monks, but the wider world. Their agriculture influenced farming, their brewing traditions inspired local craft. Their hospitals cared for the sick, their schools taught generations of children. The monastery was not only a retreat, but also a center of knowledge, healing, and learning. Even today, echoes of monastic rhythm remain. Our division of the day into hours, our preservation of libraries, our rituals of study and work, all trace faintly back to the steady bells of monasteries. Though few today would choose the life of a medieval monk, the lessons of their discipline remain. Silence in a world filled with noise, patience in a world rushing forward, community in a world that often prizes the self above all. Imagine taking a moment of your own day and living it with monastic calm. No phones, no chatter, no haste. Only stillness, breath, and reflection. The monastery's gift was not only what it built, but what it taught. That peace can be found not in abundance, but in simplicity. Picture the monastery one final time. The chapel glows softly in the night. The cloister lies in shadow. The garden rests under the stars. The monks sleep in their narrow beds, their bodies weary, their minds at peace, ready to rise once more at the sound of the bell. Though their world is gone, its rhythm remains, a rhythm of silence, labor, prayer, and endurance. It whispers to us across the centuries, inviting us to pause, to breathe, to find stillness in the midst of life's noise. The legacy of the monastery is not only in its stones or its books, but in its quiet reminder that there is strength in simplicity and peace in silence. We have walked far together tonight, through stone cloisters and silent chapels, through the gardens and scriptoria, through the hardships of hunger and the peace of chant. We have seen the life of monks, their discipline, their labor, their devotion, and we have reflected on the lessons their world still offers. The monastery, with its silence and its rhythm, may feel distant from our modern lives. And yet, in its quiet patience, there is something timeless. The reminder that peace does not come from abundance, but from simplicity. That strength does not come from noise, but from stillness. As you listen now, you are far from the cold stones of the dormitory, far from the taste of coarse bread, far from the endless tolling of bells. You rest in your own time, your own space. The hardships of monastic life, hunger, cold, obedience, are not yours to bear. You have warmth, you have comfort, you have choice. And yet, perhaps, in the rhythm of this story, you have found a faint echo of their stillness, a moment of calm in your own night. Now, let the images of the monastery drift softly away. The arches, the cloisters, the gardens, the chants. Let them fade like candle flames at the close of night. What remains is not the weight of history, but the calm it leaves behind. You do not need to walk the cloisters. You do not need to rise at the bell. You need only rest here, now, in the safety of your own bed. Take a slow breath. Feel your body sink deeper into comfort. Let the stillness of the monastery linger in your mind, not as discipline, but as peace. The monks endured their silence and their labor so that we might inherit their books, their lessons, their reminder that there is strength in quiet. And now, it is your turn to let go, to surrender not to rule or obedience, but to rest. To help you drift fully into sleep, calm music will follow after this narration. Let it carry you gently, like the steady rhythm of chant, like the soft tolling of bells in the night. Allow it to guide you deeper and deeper, until the weight of the day dissolves, and sleep takes you in its quiet embrace. Good night, my friend. Rest well, and may peace be with you.